What's up everybody, welcome back to Simply Economics. As you probably know, there are a lot of worries about inflation right now all over the world. And therefore there's a lot of media attention going towards interest rates and quantitative easing. But if inflation is getting too high, why don't we just stop the monetary stimulus and increase interest rates? Well, at the moment, that's not as easy as it looks like. And I will tell you why in this video. Are you ready? Let's go! We have come to a critical point in monetary policies all over the world. Because inflation is getting out of control and economies are recovering according to the central banks, they have now faced the decision to stop quantitative easing. And if you don't know what quantitative easing is, let me show you in a very simple manner. Guys, interest rates are at 0% right now. We can't go any lower. People are not spending enough, so what do? Well, we can just buy bonds and other stuff from banks and pension funds with money that didn't exist before. This will increase the money supply, it will increase spending, and it will boost the economy. Oh my god, that is genius! But guys, how do we know this new money will help the economy and not just cause inflation and asset price bubbles? Shut up, Ronnie. Nobody likes you anyways. Let's do it! Anyways, let's get back to my story. Because the central banks believe the economy doesn't need this extra boost of liquidity anymore, they have decided that they want to quickly taper this buying of bonds and mortgage-backed securities. In addition to this, an even more heated discussion is about raising interest rates. But are they willing to do so? On Thursday of last week, the Bank of England raised interest rates from 0.1% to 0.25%, basically because of rising concerns of inflation. The Central Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, talked about tapering even faster and reducing quantitative easing not by $15 billion per month, but by $30 billion per month. And actually in March they will completely stop quantitative easing. They've actually also talked about the plan for raising interest rates in the near future. I will get back to this in a minute. And actually the European Central Bank also made some statements last week with regards to tapering. So it looks like the central banks want to tackle this inflation problem, but both the Federal Reserve and the ECB face two different problems, which I will discuss right now. Let's begin with the US. Last week the Federal Reserve announced their plan for tapering and interest rate hikes. Like I've said before, their asset purchases will decline by $30 billion per month, instead of the $15 billion we expected. If things remain like this is how the schedule will look like. So last month, in November of 2021, they have actually announced their taper, and they said that they would reduce their asset purchases by $15 billion per month. So starting from $120 billion per month, we are now at $105 billion per month. Then for December, again, $15 billion per month reduction, which would lead us to $90 billion per month. Then for January of 2022, we would get this $30 billion reduction, which would lead us to $60 billion in asset purchases per month. Then in February of 2022, again, a $30 billion reduction, which would lead us to $30 billion in asset purchases. And then in March, $30 billion reduction, which lead us to zero. And then quantitative easing would be completely stopped and there will be no more asset purchases. As they always say, they will only raise interest rates after they have finished QE, which would mean that we could expect a rate hike in April of 2022. And then they actually also announced their rate hike schedule, which will be 3 times 0.25% in 2022, which means the interest rates for 2022 will be between 0.75% and 1%. Now, to get a bit of a feeling what the interest rate would be for 2023 and 2024, I have actually calculated the average FOMC interest target of all the 18 members. And for 2023, that would then be 1.65%. And for 2024, it would be 2.3%. Now, I'm not an economic wizard, but I don't think I'm crazy to say that such low interest rates, such a dovish monetary policy, that will never reduce inflation. We have an inflation problem. It is not transitory. Even the Fed themselves, they have acknowledged this as well, right? Inflation for November was 6.8%, and in reality, it's probably at least 10%, maybe even 15%. Do they really think we can solve this inflation problem by raising rates to 1%? Of course not. We need positive rates, right? Interest rates need to go above inflation in order to effectively reduce inflation. And remember, in 1981, Paul Volcker actually raised interest rates to 21.5% when inflation was 10%. Now, like I've said in my previous video, the rate hikes are not high enough. And even if they were higher, there's no way the US can afford it. Think about it like this. Imagine that we raised interest rates by, say, something like 5%, right? According to this figure, it would increase interest payments to around $1.5 trillion, as every 1% increase raises the interest payments with around $230 billion. Now, it's quite difficult to calculate interest payments, but if you think about the fact that the national debt is actually almost $30 trillion, it kind of makes sense. Now, if we then compare this, so this $1.5 trillion with federal spending, then we actually see that 1.5 divided by 7 is 20%. So 20% of federal spending would go to paying back the interest. How on earth can we pay for defense, for social security, for healthcare, if 20% is already for interest payments? Well, it's simple. We can't. This problem is only more severe if interest rates have to go even higher, which is likely with the current level of inflation. But that's not the only problem. You see, really high interest rates would, of course, collapse the asset markets, it would hurt borrowers, and it would simply implode the US economy. And that is why I don't think they are going to pull the lever. I think if they raise rates, it will only be marginally. Of course, it won't be enough, right? The Democrats won't do it, and that is why I think inflation will win this battle. Let's now swiftly move on to the situation in Europe, because something else is going on here. I live in Europe myself, and the new COVID variant is causing restrictions everywhere. Okay, I can do this, okay. And where I live, which is the Netherlands, they actually introduced a lockdown again, which, well, of course it sucks. And of course the ECB is also witnessing this, well, current event, and therefore their monetary policy is a lot more dovish than in the US. And why is this? Well, the ECB, unlike the Fed, actually announced that it will keep buying bonds in 2022, and it actually won't raise interest rates at all, even though inflation for the Eurozone is at 5%. The first interest rate hike will likely be in 2023, well into 2023, and I think this is extremely concerning. I expect inflation in the Eurozone now to accelerate, and it might even catch up with the US, which is at 6.8% inflation. And lastly, and like I've discussed before, the UK actually unexpectedly raised interest rates to 0.25%, even though the new COVID variant, the Omicron variant, is spreading there extremely fast. Inflation in the UK was 5.1% for November, and the Bank of England actually said that it wanted to tackle this inflation problem, which I think it is a good thing, right? I think it is a good thing that they finally raise interest rates. But is 0.25% really gonna do anything to inflation? Let's wrap this video up though. With growing concerns about inflation, policymakers are now looking to taper and raise interest rates. But we see that in general, the Western economies are not really able to do so, because either it is unaffordable or because of new variants causing harm to the economy and causing lockdowns. That is why inflation will go up even more, and I think we should hedge ourselves in such inflationary periods. So let me know what you guys think about inflation and interest rates in your country, because of course I can't discuss every country and I can't cover every monetary policy. Please like, comment or subscribe if you like this sort of content. It would really help me out. Have a nice rest of your day.